Hello, Tashtile. Welcome to McGill University Faculty of Religious Studies. Today is a very special event for a large number of reasons, most importantly because we are so honored and pleased to be welcoming Khenpo Sodargye to McGill University. This is also a special event because it is a meeting of two communities, a Dharma community and an academic community, and it's really a pleasure to bring these two communities together. So Khenpo Sodargye is an influential and extremely prolific scholar and teacher of Tibetan Buddhism. Khenpo Sodargye was ordained at Larung Gar Buddhist Institute in 1985, where he remains actively engaged. Larung Gar is a town in Sertar County of Gartse Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture in the traditional Tibetan region of Kham, or Xikang, in China. There is a population there of over 10,000 predominantly ordained monks and nuns, making it one of the largest religious institutes in the world. It was founded by Kyabje Khenchen Jigme Punsok Rinpoche, who is also Khenpo Sodargye's root guru. In addition to his busy schedule teaching and translating at Larung Gar, Sertar Buddhist Institute, Khenpo Sodargye publishes widely, is engaged in a number of charitable activities, and travels around the world teaching on an amazingly broad variety of subjects to a broad variety of audiences. He has spoken at over 24 universities around the world, including Beijing Normal University, Columbia University, Harvard University, and now McGill University. This event would not have been possible without the help and support of McGill's Faculty of Religious Studies. So without further delay, it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome Khenpo Sodargye.
Being here today with all of you gathered here and studying and learning together with everyone as a group, it is truly a heartfelt joy for me, and I want to express how much this moment means to me. First of all, I am very grateful to McGill University, as well as Professor Laura and the other dedicated faculty and students for generously providing us with such a valuable platform. We truly appreciate your support. Personally, I am extremely thankful. This is actually my second time coming to Canada. Over 20 years ago, following His Holiness Jigme Punsok, that was my first visit to Canada. I remember it was in Halifax on the East Coast. We went there once. In the 20 years since, I had not set foot in this country. This time, with such circumstances, I have come here once again, just as I did before. As for McGill University, well, I would say for me, perhaps as early as more than 30 years ago, I had already heard of the name of this university. The reason I heard about it, now it seems your university is known as the Harvard of the North, a prestigious title, but it wasn't because of fame that I heard it. Back when we were studying in one of our courses, there was an article called In Memory of Dr. Bethune. This was in China during the 1970s and 1980s, one lesson that everyone was required to memorize. And so because of this lesson, I had this strong impression from a very early age. I remember that in the essay, In Memory of Dr. Bethune, there was a particularly representative sentence which said, utterly selfless, devoted entirely to others. This is something I still remember quite clearly. As for the other texts I memorized back then, I have already forgotten them. But I still remember that in a footnote of one of the texts, it said, Bethune once studied at the University of Toronto and later spent his medical career at McGill University. So with this kind of impression, when I received an invitation from McGill University some time ago, I immediately felt that the name was really very familiar. I wondered if I might have been here in a past life, but it turns out that wasn't the case. It was just that I had heard of this name when I was a child. Today, the main topic of our lecture that we will be discussing is some certain important principles regarding the spiritual practice of women in Tibet in particular. At the same time, the university also asked me to briefly introduce Larung Gar Buddhist Academy. Yes, I come from Larung Gar, and I have stayed at Larung Gar for 30 years. During my time at Larung Gar, a truly remarkable and unforgettable place, from 1990 until last year, I was also, in fact, one of the key figures involved in its overall administration. I just recently stepped down last year. Now, I currently continue to serve as an advisor, so I'm still quite concerned about management and other aspects. In fact, Larung Gar Buddhist Academy today, whether in the United States or in China, is often reported by many media outlets around the globe as the largest Buddhist academy in the world. Of course, I have my doubts about this, because nowadays many media reports claim I am the best in the world, number one in the world, and such statements are quite common. As for whether this is actually the case, I can't say for sure here. But regardless, Larung Gar is indeed just as the professor mentioned earlier. Currently, there are about 10,000 people who study and practice there long-term. At Larung Gar, the majority of the residents are actually Tibetans. But there are also people from various regions and ethnic groups, mainly monastics, but also many lay practitioners. It is such a large institution dedicated to specialized research, mainly Buddhist studies and various worldly subjects, including some medicine, crafts, and so on, as well as many other fields of knowledge, making it a Buddhist academy where all these are indeed studied simultaneously. The spiritual head of this Buddhist academy is notably a woman. Her name is Dakini Munso. Lama Munso is, in fact, the second president or leader of the academy. The first president was His Holiness Jigme Punso. In terms of the whole timeline of our academy, it's not like the universities here, 100 or several hundred years. We have a history of over 30 years. The first president was His Holiness Jigme Punso, and the second is Lama Munso. She has served for approximately 11 years already in this position and has been dedicated to her responsibilities, and she is still in office now. The population of our academy, from a proportional perspective, over 60% of the members in total are women. It is also, for the most part, primarily made up of young people. In terms of their entire curriculum and management system, there is no difference compared to the male members, all equal management and equal teaching content. We have been continuously cultivating talent. We have a relatively open mindset to embrace the knowledge that is indeed truly beneficial to humanity. We accept and disseminate all of it. Regarding some questions about the academy, you can ask me later. At the academy, I am mainly responsible for the teaching of the Han Chinese section. There are quite a lot of both male and female members among the Han Chinese, so I am also involved in their teaching and management. I have not stepped down yet, and I am still applying to do so. So for more than 20 years regarding the situation at the academy, especially in terms of the management of the female members and many aspects concerning them, I'm quite experienced and have a fairly good understanding of these matters. Today, I would like to talk to everyone about, in Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, there's some important knowledge about the practices, roles, and significance of female Dharma practitioners, about these knowledges based on my own personal wisdom and my personal insights and perspectives. I sincerely hope to explore these topics in greater depth together with all of you. As we all know, among the 7 billion people in the world, approximately half of the individuals are men, while the other half are women. You could also say that this world is made up of yin and yang, or in other words, of men and women, and that society and communities are formed in this way. In this process, each person's or each country's fundamental values, core beliefs, and life philosophy are different. Such principles as these, how does Buddhism explain it? I think this is something we can also explore together. Buddhism is divided into the Pali tradition, the Han tradition, and the Tibetan tradition. As for the Tibetan tradition, especially for some female practitioners who are in particular monastics, historically there has been a great deal of respect. Generally speaking, women began ordaining as monastics around the 8th century. In our Tibetan region, men started ordaining in the 8th century as well. There were 7 men to be tested. 7 people first took ordination. Afterwards, starting from the royal family of King Trisung Detsen in Tibet, some ladies began to ordain as monastics. At that time, the Tibetan people held these women in very high regard. Therefore, they were called Jomo. The term Jomo means for the king's beloved mother and the king's respected sisters. Jomo is a very respectful title. Therefore, up to the present day, Tibetan female monastics are generally called Jomo. From the perspective of certain specific Buddhist teaching, I think the view of equality between men and women should be divided into 2 different stages, early Buddhism and the later period of Buddhism. That is to say, at first, the Buddha adapted his teachings to suit the customs of society at the time. And then, as time went on and he approached the later stages, there are 2 aspects to the Dharma teachings. The principles of equality of men and women, which were mentioned in the later teachings, are expressed even more clearly within Buddhism. For example, in Tibetan Buddhism, it is generally said that the Shravakayana, the Bodhisattvayana, and the Vajrayana, these 3 vehicles encompass all of Buddhism. Let's look at these 3 vehicles. What specifically did the Buddha expect or require in the Shravakayana? For monastics, there are male monastics and female monastics. For lay people, there are male lay practitioners and female lay practitioners. Buddhism's entire retinue and community is traditionally referred to as the 4 assemblies. In fact, both lay people and monastics are given equal opportunities. Some people have told me that Buddhism is not very equal between men and women. There are 360 precepts for bhikshunis. And for bhikshus, there are 250 precepts. After getting ordained, a bhikkhuni must observe the 8 precepts. These are 8 rules requiring respect towards male monastics. For example, even if a bhikshuni has been ordained for a long time, if a man has just been ordained, she still has to show respect to him. This is a very obvious situation of inequality. Some people hold this view. I think this view is not entirely accurate. Because in fact, although bhikshunis have more precepts, having more precepts does not necessarily mean they are being insulted or disrespected. In many countries around the world, as they become more developed and more complete, its laws may also have more clauses. And the fact that bhikshunis have more precepts, it's actually a protection for her. You may not have read the Vinaya, but in the Vinaya it is explained that many of the precepts for bhikshunis, for example, are due to the fact that women, because of their physiology and their special status, are not allowed to travel alone if they do not have companions. Even in certain places, if they use some things to, like dressing up or appearing very attractive as a monastic, this could arouse others' desire and so on. There are many precepts that serve as restrictions. These ensure that her discipline remains perfect and pure. So from this perspective, we can actually see that there is actually no special element of contempt towards her, including the 8 reverences, which might be a rather specialized topic, but I'd like to mention it here as well. Regarding the 8 reverences, in fact, why was there a sense of respect from women towards men at that time? Actually, it was because at that time, in India's very unique social context, especially around 500 BCE, the entire Indian society as a whole at that time, one could say that men and women were not very equal. If Buddhism had directly adopted a completely equal status, there would have been some backlash. So at that time, Buddhism adapted to the social conditions in India, and at the same time, it also served to prevent certain women from showing disrespect, among other reasons. There was some so-called hidden meaning in this. In Buddhism, there are some teachings, such as self doesn't exist, but Buddha sometimes taught as if it did. Originally, all phenomena are not permanent, but sometimes to accommodate other religions, Buddhism would agree permanent things exist. So this kind of expedient teachings, as you can see, can also be found and is clearly present in the doctrines that were developed at a later time. Nowadays, some people may use certain parts of Buddhist teachings to explain or represent the whole content. This is not only the case with Buddhism or other religions, as well as any other field of worldly knowledge, are exactly the same in this regard. In fact, when we want to explain an entire system of thought, We must use principles that really represent the whole to make the argument. Otherwise, if we use only partial or individual or as yet immature theories to try to prove all religions or all philosophies, in fact, this is unreasonable. Furthermore, on discipline in the Shravakayana, the precepts for monastics were actually rules for a very particular and especially small group of people. For most people, these monastic precepts were not required. This is something everyone here should be able to see quite clearly. When Buddhism entered its middle period, this stage is called the Bodhisattva vehicle, or Mahayana. The perspective of the Bodhisattva vehicle was, for all sentient beings, not only men and women, but even include animals, to treat everyone equally, with genuine care and heartfelt compassion, kindness and understanding. From its perspective of equality and fairness, there is no particular special emphasis on either men or women. No one is valued more or looked down upon. There's no such phenomenon. Within this Bodhisattva vehicle, when Mahayana was later spread in the world, there was the viewpoint of Bodhisattva Nagarjuna as well as the viewpoint of Bodhisattva Asanga, which became the Profound View School and the Extensive Conduct School. Regardless of which of these two schools one belongs to, the Bodhisattva precepts, specifically for men and women, the initial generation of bodhicitta, and the number of precepts upheld in the middle are all the same. Not are the precepts observed by men and women exactly the same, really, but the entire philosophy to truly benefit all sentient beings in every possible way, because the ideal of Mahayana Bodhisattva is that we must help all sentient beings in the world. In this regard, men must play a role, and women must also play a role. Many have read the Avatamsaka Sutra. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, Sudhana, the youth visited many dedicated teachers and spiritual friends among the 53 teachers, and many of whom were women who were thoughtfully and skillfully guiding vast numbers of disciples. Then, entering into the Buddha's later years, which is also considered the third stage, regarding certain views of Vajrayana, including the views found in the Kalachakra Tantra, not only is there an equal view of men and women, but there is actually even more emphasis placed here on the unique wisdom and great compassion of women, which are given full expression, although Vajrayana contains many different teachings, such as outer and inner tantras, different doctrines, there is a commonality among them, which is that Vajrayana in total has 14 root vows that everyone who enters Vajrayana must observe. Among them, one important rule is that you must not, under any circumstances, slander women, because there is a genuine, special kind of respect for women, and it does not say that you cannot slander men. So many men feel that this is a bit unfair. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, in the first stage of Buddhism, sometimes, in fact, it is said, for example, that the female body is impure and so on. But later it is also stated that, in fact, the male body is the same. There are explanations for this in Buddhism. When discussing Vajrayana, there is a deliberate praise of the female body and some of the unique and special qualities of women. But in fact, there are some aspects that men do possess, but in some areas, it truly may not be achievable. For example, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are many women who have attained realization through practicing secret tantric methods, an extremely large number, in fact. For instance, in the 11th century, there was a famous female practitioner named McGill. I have read her biography before. It is very moving. From her childhood to her teenage years, and throughout her entire life up to the age of 98. It was very amazing, because during that time, she was often followed by 5,000 disciples. And among those, under her guidance, about 1,263 disciples had already attained enlightenment or awakening. At that time, the Tibetan population was not very large. So in such a social context, for her to gather so many people and for so many to achieve transcendental enlightenment, personally, I have her biography in Tibetan. After reading it, I think that some of her achievements are really incredible. The lineage of her teachings is called the Severance School. It has continued up to now for nearly 1,000 years. In all the regions of Tibet, this practice is still being followed, and the results of this practice are truly remarkable. In Tibet, there are also many such typical examples, with a considerable number of female practitioners and accomplished masters. Last year, I had the opportunity to go to Harvard University for a lecture. At the same time, I attended a class given by a female professor. I went to listen myself. She happened to be discussing, at that particular time, the topic of 8th century Tibet. During that period, there was a great female practitioner, Yeshe Tsogyal. At that time, they were studying her biography. In Yeshe Tsogyal's life, there was a tragic incident where she experienced being raped by someone. But this experience did not make her lose confidence. Instead, she used the methods of spiritual practice to bring about a better transformation in her life. Moreover, she developed a sense of compassion for the perpetrator. She never felt hatred or anger. Because of this, the professors and students at Harvard were all analyzing her state of mind and the benefits spiritual practice brought her. At the same time, they also mentioned similar raping cases in Seattle and Nepal, but these women later experienced great suffering in their lives and even felt a deep sense of despair. Take Yeshe Tsogyal, for example. She lived about 1,300 years ago. At that time, not only was her spiritual practice excellent, but even when she encountered such a major event in her life, she did not seek revenge or return evil for evil. Instead, she turned this event into the best new beginning and the best form of practice in her life. I think this is something that many people would probably find very difficult to do. What I find even more important is that she lived more than 1,300 years ago from now in the distant past. All the works co-authored by Yeshe Tsogyal and Guru Padmasambhava were meticulously written down and catalogued and hidden through her transcendental, otherworldly methods. In Tibetan Buddhism, we call these terma, or hidden treasures. Thousands upon thousands of such works and books have all been carefully and lovingly preserved for the benefit of future generations. She used transcendent wisdom and extraordinary skills to seal and safeguard them, allowing them to be passed down to this very day. Today, many of us here, including Western scholars and some religious figures and scholars from the East, when we open these scriptures of Guru Padmasambhava, Yeshe Tsogyal, the revered Dakini, we hold an incomparable faith and reverence for her. Therefore, within our Buddhist community, among our members, practitioners, and followers, women actually have truly tremendous potential and have contributed greatly to the attainment of transcendent liberation. Looking back through history, whether it was Padmasambhava, as well as the 80 great Indian Mahasiddhas, many of them achieved accomplishment through the special wisdom and skillful means associated with women. In particular, I have heard that professors at your university are conducting research on some of the dohas or spiritual songs of the Venerable Saraha. That is excellent. If you look at his history, his accomplishments are inseparable from certain spiritual practices. From the perspective of worldly knowledge, I think that men and women each have their own distinctive and valuable qualities in their own ways. In the world, there is a saying that goes, "Men are like mountains, women are like water." That is to say, men tend to be strong and constructive in grand and macro aspects, such as these, possessing resilience and a capacity for building things. They have a talent for planning and strategizing, and in these areas they have their own skills and characteristics. Women, on the other hand, are gentler and more refreshing, meaning they bring love, compassion, and care to others. In this regard, they have their own strengths and skills. Looking at the structure of the world as a whole, it should be a combination of yin and yang, the union of two complementary forces. Human beings in this world are the same way. Some so-called feminists or advocates of women's rights, as they are sometimes called, believe that whatever men can do, women should also be able to do. Therefore, in terms of our rights and status, We must strive to receive the same treatment as men in all aspects of life. So in different situations, they express these views and opinions. In my opinion, if they can truly inspire and bring out these special abilities, that is absolutely fine as well. But in reality, the whole world should actually be viewed from the perspective that there is a saying in the world: men take the world as their home, women take the home as their world. In other words, as women often have the so-called network thinking, they tend to care more about the life around them. This is truly what suits her best. Whereas men, generally speaking, when it comes to the bigger picture and the overall macro perspective, be a leader or play a distinctive and unique role in this area is more suitable. So men and women should each play to their strengths and should stand in slightly different positions to express or to contribute their own unique energy. This is also very important. Just like in our world, the sun has its own light and its role in shining upon all living things. It has its warmth and its unique function. And the moon has its own light, which is completely different from the sun, with its soft, cool light. It also brings a sense of joy and tranquility to our world. It has its own function. So every single person in this world, no matter who they are, the roles they play are not necessarily completely equal. Sometimes when I see large international events, including important meetings of national leaders, most of the participants are men. At such times, I often think of, there is an old saying that goes, behind every successful man, there is a great woman. At that moment, I would imagine in my mind for each of them, for example, in large conferences and major policy-making groups, women are relatively few. No matter which country in the world it is, I can't help but think that for each of them to have achieved such success today, or to have attained such a social status today, there must be different women supporting him behind the scenes. In fact, I think that about women, when it comes to compassion and love for society and humanity, they actually have a special quality. This can be said to be innate. They genuinely want to help and support others, even when we're just having a meal. Women are generally able, in fact, to notice the smallest details. They are sensitive and have a kind of wisdom to observe those around them. In this world, no matter what kind of person you are, for the most part, from a young age, it is the mother's love and nurturing that has the greatest influence. This time I flew all the way from Australia to the United States and then to Canada. When we flew over from Australia, it was a long night flight, lasting for more than 10 hours. At that time, I saw a couple who appeared to be, or at least seemed to be, from somewhere in Africa. A man and a woman gently holding a small child, but this child started crying as soon as they sat down. At first, the man also helped take care of the child, but by the middle of the night, the man was asleep the whole time, while the woman stood holding the child. This naughty child crying each time she tried to sit down. So, for the sake of keeping the whole plane quiet, she stood the entire night. When we were about to arrive, I said to my neighbor, "This mother is really pitiful. She spent the whole night caring for this child. She didn't sleep at all and stood the entire time." So I thought, it's not just her. Maybe for many people, when it comes to caring for children and those around them, mothers probably give the most. I often think among all the women in the world, especially mothers, give the most to their families and children. They are probably the ones who sacrifice the most. At certain times, she is willing to be hungry and tired, but others may never know about it. Take me, for example, when I was young. My family's financial situation wasn't very good. We rarely had anything delicious at home. Whenever there was just some tasty food, my mother would always give it to the family, especially to children. We often found that she hadn't eaten any herself. Even when a complete stranger came to visit, she was still willing to give them the good food. Sometimes she would go hungry herself, and sometimes she would make do with whatever was left. I believe that many of us perhaps are no longer in that kind of financial situation now, and maybe we eat very well. But when it comes to what we give to those around us, so-called motherly love is especially emphasized in Buddhist scriptures. Therefore, every one of us who has received a mother's love should be even more aware of her truly unique compassion and empathy for others. In Buddhism, we often say, when liberating all sentient beings, we speak of liberating mother sentient beings, but we don't mention liberating father sentient beings. I'm not sure if you can accept this. As women, it's not only about caring for the details, affairs, and responsibilities of the family and those around them. More importantly, there are some women who are also quite suited to accomplishing great things. Take Queen Victoria, for example. She is a well-known historical figure. It is said that she not only cared for her family, including demonstrating qualities such as tolerance, love, and genuine care for her family members, and was extremely attentive to details, but more importantly, she became a symbolic figure in ruling all of Britain, with a reign that lasted over 60 years. There have also been many great women throughout history who have made contributions to the world. In the field of science, for example, Madame Curie, she was notably the first woman in history to win a Nobel Prize. Although after she won the Nobel Prize for the first time, she encountered some hardships in her life, she later showed great strength, just like Yeshe Tsogyal mentioned earlier, standing up to face them, which is something truly rare and truly remarkable in our world. There are also others in the world, such as Mother Teresa, who showed love to those who were suffering, to strangers, to the poor. She later was awarded Nobel Prize. Aung San Suu Kyi, she gave up her own beloved family and a life of true freedom for the sake of her country and people. In the end, throughout her career, it is clear to everyone her remarkable strength and perseverance. Even from a worldly perspective, this is indeed the case. But in any case, as a Buddhist, I often see that there are many people in Buddhist communities who are dedicated to spreading the Dharma, and now more and more women are involved, and they are also demonstrating increasing wisdom and remarkable compassion. On this point, I was thinking that 3 months before the Buddha entered parinirvana, he spoke of a sutra called the Sutra on the Extinction of Dharma. Extinction means nirvana, the end of something. In the Sutra on the Extinction of the Dharma, it is said that in the future, women will be exceptionally diligent, always striving to work hard and consistently perform many virtuous and noble deeds, while men will become more lazy and arrogant, not practicing the Dharma or upholding its meaning. Some even, when they simply see practitioners, regard them as if they were dirt, feeling no faith at all. So from this, it seems that in Buddhist practice, as we can see, women may have a particularly unique and truly special, incredibly strong strength. No matter what, our world still is made up of incredibly wondrous causes and conditions. Such is this world. In this process, many people like to pursue beauty, especially women in particular. Many people pay more attention to external physical beauty. In fact, external beauty is merely what our eyes can perceive. The real concept of beauty actually brings people a truly genuine sense of comfort and happiness. That is what real beauty is. At this time, many women feel the need to pursue external beauty, and this is indeed necessary. It is also essential for human survival and will continue to be in the future. It will always be indispensable. But more importantly, I think, women should create a family atmosphere in their home, one that is warm and welcoming. For example, one that is much warmer, even cozier, and definitely happier. If you can create such an atmosphere, women actually have this opportunity. After that, your so-called beauty will not only be reflected in your external appearance, but more importantly, it may be manifested throughout our entire family and society, and even in this whole world and as well, in a way that is more lasting and eternal. So I believe that for all social groups that are led by women, pursuing the most perfect inner values is extremely important, because our life is not singular but multifaceted. It requires beauty in many aspects. Thank you.